It's spring 1943, the height of World War II. Off the coast of Madagascar, a never-before-attempted mid-ocean transfer is underway. Atop the conning tower of German U-80 stands Subhas Chandra Bose, once Gandhi's star disciple, now a fugitive, armed with a plan to bring the British Empire to its knees. Suddenly, the sea erupts. Just 90 yards away, the Japanese submarine I-29 bursts from the depths. Steel meets moonlight. The black water seethes between the two vessels as a rubber raft is hurled into the waves, instantly caught in the swell. Time is of the essence. Allied sonar patrols could descend at any moment. Bose jumps in. A wave slams into the raft, flipping it. He vanishes beneath the surface. Panic erupts. Shouts ring out in German and Japanese. Flashlights rake the sea. Bose must reach Asia. If he unites the Indian diaspora and marches west with an army of his own, the sun may finally set on the British Empire. The first INA. By the time World War II erupted, the British Empire stretched across the globe, unlike any other empire in human history. From the pine forests of Canada to the sunburnt sands of Australia, their flag flew high. But the empire's most coveted possession was in the east, India, a colony not only rich in resources, but one whose manpower propped up the entire imperial war machine. They used to say the sun never set on the British Empire, but that was about to change. In February 1942, Japan stormed through Malaya and seized British Singapore in a lightning campaign. Overnight, the empire lost its eastern stronghold. In the aftermath, over 60,000 Indian soldiers serving under the British flag were taken prisoner. Among them was Captain Mohan Singh of the 1st Battalion Bahawalpur Infantry. Defeat had disarmed him, but not broken him. In captivity, Singh saw not despair, but opportunity. He approached his Japanese captors with a radical idea: allow him to raise a new Indian army, not to serve the British Empire, but to fight against it. A force forged from the very soldiers Britain had once commanded, an army for Indian liberation. The Japanese, eager to harness anti-colonial sentiment and present themselves as Pan-Asian liberators, agreed. Publicly, they proclaimed Asia for the Asians. Privately, their high command viewed Indians as expendable auxiliaries, tools to be used, not partners to be respected. Still, Singh moved quickly. By March 1942, the First Indian National Army, or INA, was formed in Singapore. With Japanese support, it swelled to nearly 40,000 men. They were armed with surplus rifles, issued basic gear, and given vague promises of autonomy that the Japanese never intended to honor. From the beginning, Singh demanded operational independence. He wanted an Indian-led force with its own command, strategy, and objectives. The Japanese refused. Orders flowed from Tokyo, not from Indian hands. INA officers were routinely overruled, belittled, and sidelined. Singh's protests grew louder. He envisioned a nationalist army marching triumphantly into Calcutta. The Japanese envisioned a puppet militia dancing to their tune. The rift widened. By late 1942, the INA was fracturing. Morale collapsed, desertion soared, and the chain of command fell apart. Singh was arrested. The dream disintegrated. What remained of the INA was limited and diminished. It would take a different kind of leader to revive that dream. The other Gandhi. Subhas Chandra Bose had once walked the halls of power in London, a star student who ranked 4th in the prestigious Indian Civil Services exam. By all accounts, he was on track for a career as a senior bureaucrat under the Raj. But Bose saw through the polished veneer of British governance. Behind the talk of civilizing missions and modernizing India was an empire that survived by division and extraction. Just as he was about to qualify to become a senior Raj bureaucrat, he refused to complete the final step, stating he could not serve a colonial regime. The move was a blow to his family's prestige. A wealthy family of English-educated bureaucrats who had benefited greatly from British colonial rule. Yet it was precisely this education in philosophy and humanism that had encouraged Bose to explore his Indian roots and realize how the British Empire was oppressing his nation. The British praised themselves as builders of railways and institutions, but the system was built to serve imperial interests. Ethnic, Religious and caste divides were not just tolerated, but encouraged. Over 500 princely states were kept nominally autonomous, a deliberate strategy to fragment Indian unity. Landlords and traditional elites were elevated through patronage, creating a loyal ruling class that owed its position to colonial rule. The British exploited the systems already in place in India to rule over the population, and if that failed, they were not afraid to use violence. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre in 1919, where British troops fired on unarmed civilians in Amritsar, exposed the violent undercurrent of imperial control. Bose knew the system could not be reformed from within. He resigned from the civil service and returned to India to join the struggle for independence. Back in India by 1921, Bose met Mahatma Gandhi, a man with whom he shared the vision of an independent India, but he found his views fundamentally at odds. While Gandhi believed in nonviolence as a principle, Bose saw it as a tactic, one that had reached its limit. He admired Gandhi's mass mobilization, but questioned the logic of restraint in the face of British repression. Where Bose wanted action, speed, and revolution, Gandhi counseled patience, discipline, and spiritual strength. In the 1930s, Bose quickly became one of the most dynamic figures in the Indian National Congress, working alongside Gandhi despite their differences. Little by little, Bose made clear to his followers his certainty that the British Empire would not relinquish control without a fight. In 1938, Bose was elected Congress president and re-elected in 1939, defeating Gandhi's platform. That second victory triggered a crisis. By now, Bose had made clear he believed the path to freedom would have to be violent. Most of the Congress Working Committee resigned in protest, citing Bose's increasing centralization of power and willingness to embrace authoritarianism and violence. Disgraced in Congress, Bose was forced to step down. Escape from India. When World War II broke out, Bose saw it as a golden opportunity. Britain, of course, would try to use India's vast population to fuel the manpower needs of its war machine, and this would stress colonial relations even more. Bose began a campaign urging Indians to mass resist British rule in this critical time. For the British, things were not going well. Germany had crushed the Allies at the Battle of France. The US had no intention of joining the war, and Britain was all alone in Europe against the Axis war machine. Their other major asset, India, was now in turmoil, threatened by Japan in the east and by anti-colonialist movements inside. Gandhi was a worrisome threat, but this other man, Bose, had to be stopped. Considered a dangerous revolutionary, Bose was sent to Calcutta under house arrest. The intelligence community monitored him closely, using informants, intercepted letters, and plainclothes surveillance teams to prevent his movements. Despite all this, on the night of January 16, 1941, he vanished. Feigning illness and isolation, he slipped into deep cover. Dressed as a Pashtun insurance agent named Ziauddin, with a beard, turban, and long overcoat, he stepped into a blackout-covered street and into a waiting car, driven by his nephew, Sisir Bose. The city was under heavy surveillance, but the cover of darkness and timing of a shift change helped him evade British eyes. The car sped across central India to Gomo station, where Bose boarded a train to Peshawar. Still disguised, he kept a low profile and moved through crowded compartments with the practiced ease of a seasoned operative. In Peshawar, he connected with a network of revolutionaries from the Hindustan Socialist Republican Association, or HSRA, including a young man named Bhagat Ram Talwar. Unbeknownst to Bose, Talwar was playing all sides, at various times working for the British, Germans, Italians, and Soviets. Bose had already vanished from British radar. MI5 and the Indian police were left scrambling. By the time they realized what had happened, Bose was gone. He had reached Afghanistan. Bose spent the next 2 months in Kabul under immense pressure. The winter was unforgiving, and he was constantly ill. There were few he could trust, and betrayal remained a constant threat. He waited for diplomatic clearance, working through contacts in the Italian and German embassies. Finally, he was issued an Italian passport under the alias Count Orlando Mazzotta. He departed Kabul disguised as a diplomat and traveled through Central Asia, crossing through Samarkand and into the Soviet sphere. He spoke little of the languages in these regions and once pretended to be deaf and mute to avoid drawing suspicion. Though his original goal was to reach Japan, the Soviets refused. Stalin's regime, locked in a non-aggression pact with Germany under the Molotov-Ribbentrop Agreement, did not see Bose as a reliable ally. Instead, he was handed over to Nazi Germany. The Germans saw an opportunity. A well-educated, charismatic Indian revolutionary could be a propaganda windfall. And for Bose, the road to a national army capable of fighting the British had opened a new chapter. Indian Nazis. On May 29, 1942, Subhas Chandra Bose finally met Adolf Hitler at the Wolf Slayer in Rustenburg. The long-anticipated encounter, however, was underwhelming. Hitler knew Bose's value as an anti-British agent in Asia, but he had little respect for this brown foreigner and the plight of his uncivilized nation. Hitler spoke at length, delivering a patronizing monologue about India's supposed unreadiness for self-rule. He praised the British imperial administration, portraying it as a necessary civilizing force. Bose listened, trying to interject. He proposed a joint Indo-German declaration against the British Empire and asked for military assistance. Hitler declined. Still hoping for a separate peace with London, he didn't want to antagonize Britain unnecessarily. In the end, all he offered was vague moral support and a few pleasantries. No weapons, no commitment. Despite the snub, Bose stayed in Germany. He pivoted toward what could be done within those limits. With approval from the Abwehr and Foreign Ministry, he began organizing a military force composed of Indian prisoners of war captured in North Africa by Rommel's Afrika Korps. This became the Free India Legion, the Azad Hind Fauj. Roughly 4,500 strong at its peak, it was an odd sight. Indian soldiers clad in Wehrmacht uniforms, bearing Nazi-issued rifles, yet wearing their own special insignia. A leaping tiger superimposed on the colors of the Indian tricolor, and Azad Hind shoulder patches. Their training took place at Königsbrück, near Dresden. The oath they took was to Subhas Chandra Bose, not Hitler. The Legion's formation was unprecedented. These were Indian nationalists serving under the command of one of the world's most brutal fascist regimes, hoping to liberate their country from another empire. They marched in German parades, learned European battle drills, and even drew attention from curious Nazi officials. But they were never deployed to India. Bose, though frustrated by the constraints, used his time to broadcast anti-British radio messages across Europe and the Middle East. The Free India Center in Berlin coordinated propaganda and morale, distributing leaflets and managing diplomatic outreach to Axis-aligned and neutral countries. Bose styled himself as the head of a government in exile and maintained the appearance of authority. To Berlin, Bose remained a useful asset, though never a priority. His vision of marching through the Khyber Pass with Axis support faded with each passing month. But as he lost German interest with every passing week, thousands of miles away, the legend behind the man made its way higher and higher up the Japanese hierarchy. Japan was looking for an Indian revolutionary, one loved by his people, a man who could spark the flame of revolution and facilitate Japan's conquest of Asia at the same time. Soon, the Japanese made their offer. They would help him build his army. Mid-sea transfer. By early 1943, the tide of war in Europe had shifted. Germany was no longer planning offensives. It was trying to survive. Hitler could no longer afford to entertain Bose's vision of a German-assisted invasion of India. But when the Japanese expressed renewed interest in Bose, Hitler saw an opportunity. Offload the Indian revolutionary and perhaps help the Axis cause in Asia by forcing the British to divert resources away from Europe. Bose was thrilled. His ultimate aim had always been to reach Southeast Asia. Japan offered a theater where he could lead troops, not make speeches. So began one of the most daring submarine missions of the war. On February 8, 1943, Bose boarded U-180, a German Type 9D-1 long-range submarine from the port of Kiel. He was accompanied by his trusted aide, Abid Hassan. Their journey would last nearly 3 months beneath hostile waters, avoiding Allied patrols by bypassing the Mediterranean and rounding the Cape of Good Hope. The rendezvous point was the southern Indian Ocean near Madagascar, off the port of Sabang. There, under strict radio silence and in one of the most closely coordinated operations of the war, U-180 met with the Japanese submarine I-29. On April 28, 1943, both submarines surfaced, an extremely risky maneuver given Allied dominance over the air and sea. In rough waters, under constant threat of detection, Bose and Hassan transferred via rubber raft. The swells were unpredictable. Both crews faced the danger of collision or accidental drowning. The transfer operation took hours and required absolute coordination. Bose carried with him not only propaganda materials and plans, but possibly coded intelligence and documents vital to his future operations. For Germany, his successful handoff was symbolic. For Japan, it was strategic. Bose's presence in Asia could help rebrand the Japanese conquest as liberation. He was the missing piece to justify their occupation of Southeast Asia as part of a broader anti-imperial movement. Bose landed in Japanese-occupied Sabang, Sumatra. From there, he was flown to Tokyo. This time, the reception was far warmer. Japanese officials treated him not as a pawn, but as a partner. He was granted state-level support, an official platform, and resources to rebuild the Indian National Army under his direct command. After years of exile, surveillance, and detours through half the world, Subhas Chandra Bose was finally where he needed to be, on the doorstep of India, with an army on the horizon and war still to be waged. Forming the NIA. Now backed by Japan, Subhas Chandra Bose assumed leadership as the supreme commander of the newly reformed Indian National Army. He also declared the creation of a provisional government of Free India, headquartered in Japanese-occupied territory. To many Indian nationalists, especially in Bengal, Bose was now more than a politician. His escape from British house arrest, his journey across continents, and his refusal to compromise with colonial rulers elevated him to near-mythical status. The British colonial government labeled Bose a traitor. They portrayed the INA as fascist collaborators and tried to downplay its appeal. Despite this, the INA quickly grew, composed primarily of Indian POWs captured during the Malayan and Singapore campaigns. One of the most remarkable units within the INA was the Rani of Jhansi Regiment, an all-women's combat unit led by Captain Lakshmi Sehgal. It was the first of its kind in Asia. Bose believed in symbolic power as much as military strength, and this regiment signaled a radical vision of inclusive Indian nationalism. Volunteers joined for many reasons. Some were drawn by Bose's charisma and his vision of a free India. Others saw the INA as an escape from the harsh conditions of Japanese POW camps. Regardless of motivation, recruits were subjected to intense training routines, basic drills, jungle warfare techniques inspired by Japanese doctrine, and even political education sessions to reinforce ideological discipline. The INA operated as an auxiliary to the Japanese military. It relied entirely on Japanese logistical support, supplies, weapons, even food. This dependence made operations difficult at times, especially as Japan's own resources were stretched thin. Bose emphasized three principles: discipline, nationalism, and self-respect. His aim was not just to build an army, but to forge a movement that would embody the spirit of an independent India. Bose had transformed scattered POWs and ragtag volunteers into a political military force with a singular mission: to end British rule. Marching into India. In March 1944, the INA finally set foot on Indian soil. Together with the Japanese 15th Army, under General Renya Madaguchi, INA troops launched Operation Ugo, crossing the Indo-Burma border under cover of dense jungle and monsoon mist. Their goal was to capture Impal and Kohima, rally Indians in the northeast, and ignite a revolt that would sweep across the subcontinent. Those believed that once the Indian people saw their own troops returning, not under British command, but as liberators, the entire colonial edifice would collapse. They entered Moirang, a small town in Manipur. There, for the first time in modern history, the Indian tricolor was raised on Indian soil by an armed Indian force. The symbolism was electric. Bose broadcast the moment across Azad Hind radio, declaring that the INA had come home. But symbolism wouldn't be enough. British and Indian troops dug in at Kohima and Impal. General William Slim had anticipated the offensive. Refusing to engage in the dense jungles where Japanese excelled, Slim drew the enemy into the open plains of Impal. There, he built airstrips, drop zones, and fortified positions. RAF and USAAF planes kept his forces supplied, even after the Japanese cut off roads to Dimapur and India. In just weeks, over 14 million pounds of supplies were dropped from the skies. The British were entrenched and ready. At Kohima, the fighting turned savage. Japanese and INA soldiers stormed the British garrison, whose defenders, no more than 2,500, held out against over 15,000 attackers. The tennis court of the Deputy Commissioner's bungalow became a literal front line, with INA and British Indian troops separated by mere yards. Grenades flew nightly across the court. Machine guns barked at silhouettes in the rain. Hand-to-hand combat raged through bunkers and trenches. The Japanese struck again and again. On April 6th, they unleashed a furious assault from the west. They surged over DIS and FSD hills into the burning Bashaz supply huts. West Kent sappers counterattacked with demolition charges amid smoke and screams. Kohima was a furnace of violence. Water was rationed to half a mug per day. Ammunition dwindled. Yet the British held, supported by Nagas who carried wounded men and brought intelligence. Mortar fire, machine guns, and bayonets did the rest. At Impala, monsoon rain swallowed roads and turned fields into mire. Japanese and INA troops, ravaged by malaria, starvation, and exhaustion, fought on. Allied air power hammered them from above. With each week, Japanese supply lines unraveled. Slim had gambled and won. Despite Bose's efforts, he reportedly traveled to the front to personally inspire his troops. The Japanese command structure was fractured, and coordination with INA units deteriorated. Soldiers fought bravely, but without ammunition, food, or medical support, courage alone couldn't sustain them. By July 1944, the retreat began. What had started as a triumphant advance ended in catastrophe. The Japanese withdrew in disorder, abandoning their wounded and leaving INA units to fend for themselves. Thousands fell in the jungles. Survivors returned broken. Many never recovered. For Bose, the defeat was shattering. His dream of liberating India by force had reached its peak, and then collapsed under the weight of impossible terrain, logistical nightmares, and unrelenting Allied power. The INA never recovered militarily. It had marched into India with banners high, only to be pushed back into exile. The Battle of Impala marked both the pinnacle of Bose's campaign and the beginning of its end. A free India. Bose refused to surrender. In the chaotic final months of the war, he fled toward Manchuria, hoping to make contact with the Soviets and secure a new front against British imperialism. But on August 18, 1945, his journey ended in tragedy. A Japanese plane carrying Bose reportedly crashed in Taiwan. He suffered third-degree burns and perished hours later, or so the story goes. This became the subject of decades of conspiracy theories, disputed eyewitness accounts, and government inquiries. But regardless of the circumstances, his war was over. Militarily, the INA had been crushed. The Battle of Impala-Kohima was a disaster. Japan's defeat meant the end of Axis support, and with it, Bose's hopes for armed liberation. Politically, the NIA's legacy was very much alive. In November 1945, the British government put captured INA officers on trial at the Red Fort in Delhi. The spectacle backfired. Instead of discrediting the movement, the trials ignited nationwide protests. From Bombay to Calcutta, people took to the streets. Even leaders who had disagreed with Bose, Nehru, Gandhi, Patel, voiced admiration for the courage and sacrifice of the INA. The public rallied around the accused men. Indian soldiers in the British Army began questioning their allegiance. Naval mutinies broke out in Bombay. The British saw the writing on the wall. Their control over India's armed forces, the very pillar of their colonial rule, was no longer assured. Within 2 years, the British were gone. In 2013, the British National Army Museum named the Battle of Kohima as Britain's greatest battle, citing its role in halting Japanese expansion. But for India, the legacy of that battle was something else entirely. The final proof that the empire was bleeding.